This recording is for Algebra 1, Chapter 1, Lessons 4 and 5. We're going to be talking about adding and subtracting real numbers. So that means decimals and fractions. So everything we talk about here today, you should be able to do with decimals and fractions. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the identity property of addition. Basically, that just means that anytime you add 0, the number that you added 0 to is your answer. So anything plus 0 is what you started with. Just remember that. And here's an example. So like negative x plus 0 is still negative x, 2 plus 0 is still 2. All right, additive inverses. Additive inverses are a number and its opposite. So 4 and negative 4 would be additive inverses. And we call them additive inverses because when you add them, you get 0, which is basically what the inverse property of addition is. So see additive inverse and inverse property of addition. They sound very similar. They use a lot of the same style of words. And that's because when you add additive inverses, you will always get 0. So in this case, you've got like negative 3 and 3 equals 0, and x and negative x equals 0. So additive inverses add to 0, which is what the inverse property of addition is. Yay! Alright, oh, and here's another example. We've got negative y plus y equals 0 because the opposite of y is negative y, and the opposite of negative y is y. But when you add them up, you get 0. So there you go, additive inverses. And 4 plus negative 4, the 4 and the negative 4 are additive inverses, which I kind of set up there. When you add them up, you get 0. Alright, moving on. Adding numbers with the same sign. Well, you're going to add them up and keep the sign because basically if you're adding a positive and a positive number, you're just going to get a more positive number, and you're adding a negative and a negative, you're just going to get a more negative number. So here's the example. So if I've got 2 plus 6, 2 plus 6 are both positive. 2 and 6 are both positive. So when you add them up, you get a more positive number, which is 8. And then when I have negative 2 and negative 6, when you add them up, you get a more negative number, which is negative 8. So same sign means both positive or negative. So when I'm talking about signs, I'm sorry if I didn't mention that before. A sign is whether a number is positive or negative. The sign on a positive number is usually just nothing, and we just assume the number is positive. But the sign on a negative number has a little negative sign in front of it. All right. So when we're adding different signs, one negative number and one positive number, things get a little tricky, and hopefully this is just review so that I can kind of glaze over this and it's okay. Negative 2 plus 6. In this case, the 2 is negative and the 6 is positive. When the signs are different, we need to subtract them. So it doesn't matter which came first, you just take the bigger number, subtract the smaller number, and forget the negative at first. So it would actually be 6 minus 2, which is 4. And remember, even though it says we're supposed to be adding, because the signs are different, how we handle the problem is that we actually subtract. So again, even though it says we're adding, because we're adding two numbers that are on opposite sides of 0, we're actually going to handle the problem as if it was subtraction. Okay? So that's why I did 6 minus 2. And then, to figure out the sign of the answer, whether your answer is positive or negative, you're going to look at the number that's furthest from 0. In this case, 6 in the problem was furthest from 0, and since 6 was positive, my answer is going to be positive. So take the sign from the number furthest from 0, that's what the little sign says, in this case the 6, and it's going to donate the positiveness to the 4 right over here. Right, we can make that a different color. Let's just highlight it. Right there. So that's why the 4 is positive, is because the 6 was further from 0 than the negative 2, and therefore the 6 donates its sign. All right, another example. 8 plus negative 10. We're going to subtract 10 minus 8, which is 2, and since the 10 was furthest from 0, it's going to donate its sign to the 2. So the answer is actually negative, because the 10 was furthest from 0 and the 10 was negative. All right, next up, subtraction. All right. So if you needed to subtract when you had an addition problem, now that you have a subtraction problem, you're actually going to add. And you're going to add by turning the subtraction sign into an addition sign, right there. And then you're going to take the second number and turn it into its opposite. So if it was a positive 2 before I started adding the opposite, it's now going to be a negative 2. All right, and it's always the second number. This is the most vital thing that you can remember when it comes to this whole add the opposite thing. It has to be the second number. Don't try to take the opposite of the first number. All right? Now we basically have 6 plus negative 2. Now that it's a positive, now that it's an addition problem, we're going to follow the rules from the previous slide. Since the signs are the same, we just go ahead and add. So a negative plus a negative is going to give me a more negative answer. Negative 6 plus negative 2 is negative 8. All right, next problem. Oh, I forgot that parenthesis there, but there's a parenthesis there. Oops. I hope if I use the right tool. Hold, give me a second. All right, not the same color, but hey, I've got a parenthesis. It's all good. So the original problem was 8 minus negative 4. And to add the opposite, I'm going to turn the subtraction sign into an addition sign, and then I'm going to take the opposite of the second number. Well, the opposite of negative 4, because it was positive before, remember? It was negative before, so the opposite of negative 4 is positive 4, which basically gives me 8 plus 4, and since the signs are the same, follow the rules from the previous page, and I'm going to end up with 12, because 4 plus 8 is 12, or 8 plus 4 is 12. All right, I believe we're on to the last slide for today. So let's briefly talk about absolute value. I can't remember if we talked about absolute value before. I'm a little fresh at this, so hopefully you know what I'm talking about when it comes to absolute value. So absolute value is the distance a number is from 0. So here, if I've got the number 4, right? 4 is 4 units. 4 units. Let me change color. 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 units from 0. Therefore, the absolute value of 4 is 4. And then if I have negative 4 is 1, 2, 3, 4 units from 0 as well. Therefore, the absolute value of negative 4 is 4 as well. And just remember that absolute value, when you're dealing with distance, and absolute value is the distance from 0, that distance is always positive. I'm never going to say I'm negative feet from somebody. I'm just going to be like, hey, I'm 5 feet behind somebody. Well, in this case, negative 4 is 4 units behind 0. So that's just how we get to a positive answer regardless of the negative number inside the absolute value. All right, so we can use it as grouping symbols. And it's kind of hard to see right here because I put the break in the wrong place. But this is the absolute value of 7 minus 8. Okay? So I went ahead and I added the opposite from the last slide, right? Because it's a subtraction problem, got to turn into addition problem, opposite of the second number, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so 7 plus negative 8. The signs are different, so I'm going to subtract. 8 minus 7 is 1. The 8 is furthest from 0. Therefore, it's going to donate sign. So it's really the absolute value of negative 1. All right? Well, negative 1 is 1 unit from 0. Therefore, the answer of the absolute value of negative 1 is 1. Okay? All right, let's see what I got next for you. All right, so we have the absolute value of negative 10 minus negative 4. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify inside of the absolute value bars because they do act as grouping symbols. So think of them kind of like parentheses, but parentheses with superpowers. Not only do you have to do everything that's inside of them first, but then you actually have to do some like mental math with it, okay? So again, absolute value bars act as grouping symbols, but they're like superpower grouping symbols, all right? So I need to add the opposite to turn that subtraction problem into an addition problem. Take the opposite of the second number, and I'm going to end up with negative 10 plus 4. Going to subtract because the signs are different. 10 minus 4 is 6, but it's going to be a negative 6 because the 10 is furthest from 0 and is going to donate its sign right there. So now I have the absolute value of negative 6. The absolute value of negative 6 is 6 because negative 6 is 6 units from 0. All right, I do believe, just a quick reminder, one last thing. Reminder, replace variables with numbers. So if you ever have like x plus 2 where x equals 3, you got to actually replace the variable with the number. And last but not least, before adding or subtracting fractions, be sure to find a common denominator. That's so pre-algebra stuff, I'm not even going to review it, but ask if you need a reminder, okay? Just because I didn't do it in the video doesn't mean you can't ask in class, okay? All right, guys, that's it. Have a good weekend because I'm recording this on Friday. Bye.